Voilà.
Bon, bonjour. Je vais faire la présentation en anglais, mais je n'ai pas de problème si après on échange en français. Si ça ne vous dérange pas, je passe à l'anglais, ok? Ça c'est?
Oui, je crois que... je crois que c'est ça.
C'est ça? C'est ça?
C'est ça. Voilà.
Okay. So I'm going to start with a presentation of Jameel Poverty Action Lab, the institution I belong to, because perhaps many of you do not know about it. JPAL was founded in 2003 by Esther Duflo and Abhijit Banerjee, two professors at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. It was established as a research center at the economics department at MIT, and today has 78 researchers from universities around the world. All these researchers, what have in common is that they use what we call randomized controlled trials. So it's like a specific way of doing impact evaluation to identify policies that fight against poverty. Okay? So the mission of JPAL is to reduce poverty by ensuring that policies based on scientific evidence, and also to be able to translate that evidence in action. Okay, so translate from more the type of academic work professors do to something that can be implemented by policymakers. So we do this through three main activities. The first one is to conduct rigorous impact evaluations, and all evaluations are based on the same methodology. I'm going to talk about a little bit about the methodology later. Then we have a big team now based in Cambridge who does policy outreach. So either they summarize different works that have been done in the same field, like to get policies lessons from them, or they can translate in very like simple policy notes, academic publications that not everyone is willing to read. Okay, so we really try to make the link between academics and people who is working in countries or in NGOs in the field. And then we also organize training. There's like one training, at least like 4 times a year, there's training that is for people working at government or people working at NGOs or even people working in academics that are willing to start working in this field. There's one kind of training that is more, I would say, general. It's just know the methodology, how like someone who would like to use that in their like daily work, but need to understand in order to be able to think about it and to work with someone else to do it. And then there's more specialized training for people like mostly from academics who are willing to start working on that. So we have these 3 areas of work. So JPAL started at Cambridge, as I said, in 2003, and now there are 5 offices. As you can see, there's one office in Latin America, another in Africa, one in Europe, and another in South Africa. There are 75 professors that are affiliated, and there are 7 programs. There are, like JPAL is organizing, there's one health, one education, one finance. There are different programs that are chaired by 2 professors that are affiliated to JPAL. And this is where we are like, little bit like to tell you about how many projects we did. Like there are 381 randomized evaluations that have been conducted in 52 countries, and there are about 236 that are now completed, okay? All of this is done by professors, so each professor has its own research agenda. Funding is raised like on the individual basis, but what, as I said, what unites these people is that they all have the same objective, and they all use the same methodology to evaluate programs. So why to experiment? Well, when we think about development and about policies to fight poverty, very often we find ourselves between positions that are very different and sometimes even opposite. No? So what do? Do we believe in people who think that we know already how to eradicate poverty, and all we need to do is to do more. So all we need to do is to spend more money. Or are we going to believe in people that say that actually there's nothing we can do about it, and all we are going to do with foreign aid is like to exacerbate the country's problems, okay? So in general, we find that the public discourse tends a tendency to polarize, which is not surprising. But what happens is that we actually know very little about what works and what do not work. For example, in terms of foreign aid, it's very difficult to know which has been the actual impact of foreign aid, because we don't know what would have happened without that foreign aid, okay? So that's why, and I say it from now because I know it's going to be a question after, like, we know that it's not applicable to every field, but for many questions like related to development, we can actually get to know what worked and what didn't work. If we want to, for example, explore which has been, I don't know, the role of central bank autonomy, we cannot do it with the methodology we're going to we propose. But in many areas, we can do work that really clarifies if a policy is effective or not. And we found that the fact that policy is not based in scientific and rigorous evidence is very damaging, because many times we see that foreign aid changes from year to year, and foreign aid or also like money of development countries governments change from year to year without knowing exactly, without more reflection of what worked or what didn't work. So for us, there's a crucial need for experimentation in both sense of the terms. On one side, we need to be inventive with new programs, not assume that if somebody has not come up with it already, it means that it is a bad idea. And also in the sense that we have a duty to learn from these experiments, okay? So a program that is not carefully evaluated is, for us, a wasted opportunity. There's always opportunity to learn from a policy that is being put in place. And even if we get it wrong, we can learn from it and we can use it for future policy design. However, learning about impact is not easy, okay? What is the effect, if any, what effect, if any, the policy have? Actually, we need to answer to the question that is, how would the individual who experienced the program have fared in the absence on the program? What we need to do is must be able to answer to the counterfactual, okay? And that's the issue in every impact evaluation. It doesn't matter what methodology we use, always the issue is okay, to what I'm going to compare this? There are many different methodologies, but we always need to ask the question, okay, how would an individual have fared without the program? And the problem is that we can observe the same individual with and without the program. So we need to create this comparison group. So the ideal is that to have an group of individuals who, except for the fact that they were not beneficiary of the program, are similar to those who received the program, okay? We want to have them as similar as possible. And for doing that, randomization is the way in which we can do it in the most rigorous way. Okay, what we do is to determine, as we do in clinic essays to test drugs, for example, we determine who is going to get the treatment, in this case the policy, the program that we're trying to evaluate, randomly. So we need to identify, actually we need to start working with governments, with NGOs, with whoever is going to implement the policy from the beginning. We always start working with them at very, very early stages where they are really designing the intervention. And we accompany them to be able to introduce randomization in the implementation. So we need to identify a large group of eligible people to the program, and we are going to allocate randomly who is going to receive the allocation and who is not going to receive it. This can be done at the individual level, can be done at the village level, can be done at the school level, can be done at many different levels depending on the evaluation and what's feasible and what's desirable also. So what we do with this methodology is that by design, program beneficiaries are not more motivated, are not richer, are not more educated than non-beneficiaries. In every aspect, in every characteristic that we compare these groups before the intervention starts, we find that all characteristics observable and also non-observable, because we work with large samples of individuals, I would say, but it's actually observation units, are similar in everything. So we are sure that if after we measure that there is an effect, this effect comes from the intervention itself and it's not coming from any other characteristics from the population itself. And also that it's not coming from any other external shock that happened in between, because both groups are exposed to the same kind of external shocks. So one thing is that it gives very clean results that are very easy to understand. When we expose at the end the results of this type of evaluations, we do not need to go with very extreme and complicated explanations on how we did to estimate things. So it's difficult to design at the beginning, to implement it, but when it's done, policymakers understand that very easily. And there's no discussion of it's this, it's that, the effect came from this factor, not from this other one. It's really like the more robust way of making impact evaluation. And it's obviously key to ask the right question, to ask questions that are interesting and that are questions from where we can learn. And it allows us to learn about the particular program, but we can also ask questions that allows us to learn in a more deeper way why the program work, or which are the motivations of people, depending on how we design the intervention and its impact evaluation. There's always around this kind of studies the question about how ethical is to exclude people. Only like to reassure everyone, all these type of studies needs to be approved by ethical committees. The same we do, like it's like social, it's all that is linked to social research. So there's no study like this that are conducted at JPAL that have not been through like an ethical committee that has approved. And also, it's particular suited to situations in which we have limited resources, or in which a government or NGOs are planning to implement the programs progressively. Okay, so it's not if actually like if one of these impact evaluations means really like to exclude people, that's not approved by the ethical committee. Okay, if the resources are there, the capacity is there, everything is there, but we said no, we're going to exclude the people because then we are not going to pass through. I think I need to go faster. No. Okay. Well, so I'm going to give 3 examples of things that we do. The first 2 projects, I have to say, I have not worked directly on them, so I'm going to tell you about them, but I don't know if I will know every detail after if you want to ask me about. In the third one is the third one that we conducted here in Morocco, in the city of Tangiers, and then for sure I can tell you everything. So the first study is a study that took place in Udaipur district in India. It was a team composed by Abhijit Banerjee, Esther Duflor, Rachel Glenister, and Dhruva Kotari. It was a work that they did with an NGO, a local NGO called Seva Mandir. And they started working with this NGO. The NGO was worried about the rate of full the coverage of full immunization in this area of India. So they first did a survey. They found out that only like 2.5% of children aged 1 to 2 had like the full cycle of immunization. And so they they start to wonder why this was happening. Like everyone knows, like vaccination is like only good for people. Like so, there are health centers in the village, in these villages, and but they recognize that there was a problem, that there's a high absenteeism of the health personnel in these clinic centers. So they wanted to answer to the following questions. Like the first hypothesis was perhaps it's only like a supply problem. So since nurses are not there, well, people do not go to get immunization because they do not know if they are going to get it or no. So they decided to implement monthly immunization, to put in place like monthly immunization camps in 60 villages. There were like always like someone identified at the community level to inform people when the immunization camp was going to take place. So people knew, okay, that day there will be an immunization campaign. And they made sure with different monitoring systems that the immunization was going to take place, okay? No matter what happens, they were going to be there. The second possibility is that perhaps there's a problem of demand, so people are not interested in immunization, they are scared, they don't know exactly what it's about. They ask themselves, can demand be affected? So they decided to introduce a very, very small extra incentive to people that was to say, okay, that the immunization campaign was going to take place, but also that they are going to provide 1 kilogram of lentils for each immunization. Very small incentive, like it costs less than $1 per shot. So they designed this experiment in which they had like out of 120 villages, they randomly selected 60 that were not going to get the camps, so that's what we call our comparison group. 60 that were going to get it, and between the 60, 30, it was only like the immunization campaign, and in the other one, it was also, they were also given to give people this small incentive. So what they found is that immunization coverage increased dramatically. As you can see, in the control village, only 5% of children between 1 and 2 years old got fully immunized. When in the group in which there was only the immunization camp, the coverage increased to 17%. And the fact of giving also like a kilogram of lentils, like almost double the immunization rate. Okay, a very little incentive, but with huge, huge impact, yes. So, so obviously when they did the cost-effective analysis, they found that it's much cheaper per shot to provide a kilogram of lentils. This NGO started to scale up the program this way, and when researchers are now trying to think about new things to do, like to understand better why people are so sensitive to such small incentives. The second project is a project that took place in Kenya. It's about insecticide-treated bed nets. Well, we all know, I'm not going to go too much about this since we already talked about this yesterday. Well, we all know like using insecticide-treated bed nets is the most effective way to prevent malaria. We know that they have high positive externalities if you get to treat enough people. There's a consensus that they need to be subsidized, but the question was by how much? So, well, in the economic theory, we have we have one vision, that is that if a good had high externalities and expensive, you want to subsidize its use, and perhaps even subsidize people to do it, like in the case we've just seen with the lentils. But there's also another position, that is that health goods you give away may not end up in the hands of those who need it most. and that the fact of paying may encourage people to use the good. Okay, if you do it for free, people are not going to value it, so they are not going to use it. So Jessica Cohen and Pascaline Dupas decided to run an experiment to test this. The questions were, are resources wasted on those receiving insecticide-treated nets for free? Are those that pay more likely to use it and need it more? And a third question they could not, you'll see, they have not fully answered, is what distributional model can achieve the 50% coverage threshold needed to knock out malaria, okay? So they did that in Western area. It's a malaria endemic, in Kenya, it's a malaria endemic area. What they did is that they selected clinics where women do like prenatal visits, and they assigned them in different groups in which they vary the level of the subsidy across clinics, okay? So these were like insecticide-treated nets given to pregnant women at prenatal visits. So they have like, I think, 4 different groups where they went from free distribution to the current subsidy level in Kenya at that point, okay? So they were like doing like really like different tranches of subsidy. So this data came from the clinics itself. So we already see that as you increase the price of the bed nets of ITN, if we want to call it, demand decreases monotonically. Like we see how many we have at zero. This is the Kenyan shelling. So we see it's obvious how it decreases. This is usage. So this is among those who got it, okay? So amongst those who got the bed net, how many of them use them actually, have it at home, they have installed it and use it. So we cannot see here, that an increase in price increases usage intensity, as some people say. And we see that there's a little bit more usage for women that are in their first pregnancy. And when we look at effective coverage. So it means we look at uptake and usage at the same time. We see that it's obvious how much coverage decreases when you increase the price. And as I said, this is from free distribution to 90% subsidy. So we are not going to full price. It's just, they are just playing in the march of 10% price people were paying, okay? So they look at the question if do higher insecticide-treated net price induce selection of more vulnerable women? The result was no. They found that people who buy the nets at the current cost-sharing price are healthier than that got it for free. Yes. So we are excluding, making people paying. We are excluding those who need it most. So they found no evidence that cost-sharing reduces wastage on those who will not use the product. They found also no evidence that cost-sharing induces selection of those who need it more. Cost sharing does considerably dampen the demand, the demand, as we saw in the graph. And this is another example where the cost-benefit analysis shows that actually free distribution is much more cost-effective than asking people to pay for some of it. Okay. And the third and last, it's a study we did in Tangiers. It was a collaboration between Veolia, Amandis, and JPAL. And it was an area where all the infrastructure, like for providing water, is there. So most of the households in the city in this area, it's almost the whole city of Tangier, but most of the households have already a private water connection at home. But Amandis had identified that there were many people that even living there were not demanding the connection at home and were using the public tap. So we did a small survey. We found out that people said that they could not afford the price of getting the home connection. And as Amandis was going to start a program called Branchement Socio-Individuel, actually it's a program that Amandis was obliged, it has committed to do that, like in the concession contract they have with the city council. This program was meant to help poor households to acquire private connections to water grid. So instead of paying the connection in 3 big installments, they were going to give like long-term credit at 0 interest rates, so to make each payment more affordable to households. As you can see, the connection is expensive. It can go between $540 to $1,300. But what they did was to offer that on credit and on cheap credit. So this was 0 interest rate. So we started to work with them. The first question was whether people are willing to pay for a home water connection. These are the poorest households in the city. Then the obvious question is access to more water, because the quality of the water at the public tap is good, and there's not a long distance to go from the public tap to the houses of people. So is water quantity, can water quantity have like an impact on health? And also like how the time that was going to be freed by the fact of not needing to fetch water was going to be used, where people use it more in productive activities, work, like people in going to school, all that kind of things, or more in like leisure activities. So what we did was here, actually everyone had access to the interest-free loan from Amandis, so anyone could go to the agency and get the connection at home. But what we did was to encourage, so to randomly select the houses that were going to be encouraged to go and do it, okay? So we did like home visits, like we selected in total around 900 households. We visited half of them. We informed them about the program. We helped them with administrative, with the paperwork. Okay, we really, like our surveyors were helping people to do it. And the control group, as I said, they had access to it, but they did not receive like the information at home, and they were not helped to get the connection. And with this encouragement, we got a huge difference between the two groups. We can see that 70% of people in the treatment group got connected, while only 10% in the control group got the connection, okay? So when the first of the key findings is that households were willing to pay a substantial amount of money to have their private tap if offered in the right conditions for them. Then we found that providing more water of the same quality into homes had no effect on health. As I said, people already had like good quality water at the tap, and we found no effect on health. Households saved significant time from not having to gather water every day, and this extra time was spent primarily on leisure and social activities. We also found that having access to water eased the tensions associated with using of the communal tap, and also increased perceived quality of life. We also found less tension within the households, like because who is going to fetch at which moment of the day and all that. And also we look at the households that were around, the ones that were encouraged, and we also found that they were more likely to buy a connection if they saw their neighbors getting one, but not as much as the ones, because we came back 2 years later and we saw, okay, when we look at how demand had evolved during these 2 years, and we saw that they were more likely to buy also a connection, but less than the people that had been helped with administrative steps. So our conclusions here are that households may be willing to pay for part of the last mile of individual connection, and this may greatly increase the social return of the fixed investments. That information on available programs and assistance to navigate administrative procedures are important in ensuring access to services. Yeah, and also that those social networks can play an important role about new programs and its benefits. Thank you very much. Bye.